All right. This is Chucky, and you're listening to Chucky Radio. This podcast is my opportunity to tell fun and entertaining stories. I love to travel, so a lot of the stories revolve around travel. And I love to bring on friends and different guests to help tell these stories. In my last episode, I was speaking with Tracie Laymon. She's a great friend who we traveled with our other friend Sarah Sharp to Puerto Rico, and we told the fun story of that trip. But then the conversation continued on, and we started getting into Tracie's filmmaking and some of the projects she's working on. And then we talked a little bit about life living in this world pandemic. And finally, we touched on one of her big passions right now, which is social injustice and the Black Lives Matter movement. So here's a continuation of that conversation with Tracie Laymon. Enjoy. Welcome to Chucky Radio. So tell me a little bit more about what's happening. You've got your short film that you shot, earlier this year or late last year?
We shot it last year. Yeah, it's called Ghosted. It's a woman with a lot of baggage falls in love with a man haunted by his past, and literally, like both of them literally has a lot of baggage, and he's literally followed by the ghost of his ex as they're trying to fall in love.
It's a very literal film.
Yeah, totally. And it's kind of told in this kind of storybook Wes Anderson kind of way. And like my new agents, they said it's kind of like Wes Anderson meets like Tim Burton meets like, dare we say, Woody Allen, kind of like, it's very quirky, So good Woody Allen in a good sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But so I'm really excited about it. It's different for me. It has kind of like a magical element that I've been missing, and I'm writing a lot more of that now. But magical realism and kind of just, I used to do so many tragic stories. Everybody died. It was just, and I think we just need, just a little more hope nowadays. And so I'm just trying to write things that inspire a little more.
The first film I remember seeing of yours, and I've got the worst memory for films, but I think it had to do with anorexia, because it was a film you made called Skinny.
Yeah, totally. And that became my nickname because back then I was thinner than now.
Oh, you're still thin. But yeah.
So y'all used to call me Skinny.
I used to call you Skinny. That was like, because you made a film called Skinny and you were skinny. I'm like, hey, that's a great name for her, Skinny. And then I remember later on, Skinny by itself just kind of felt a little bit like didn't have enough flavor to it. So I think I started calling you Skinny McNugget for a while.
Skinny McNugget. That's it.
Skinny McNugget.
I mean, what a nickname. That's a star. Starring Skinny McNugget, that's you haven't called me Skinny McNugget in a while, Chucky.
Oh, I call you Skinny McNugget every time I get a chance. I've always kind of wondered if you like that nickname or if you find it a little bit like, I don't know.
To be honest, I love nicknames. Like, they're so endearing to me, especially if there's like a story behind them or an evolution. Like, one of my colleagues started calling me T last year on a shoot, and I was just like, that's cool. Like, I feel like no one's going to use a nickname with you if they don't feel close to you or something. So I really like it. And that one has a whole story in.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, Skinny was pretty dark. That was a dark film.
It was a dark film, wasn't it? You did do dark films. You're right.
And I did the one where the girl shot herself in the head and survived and had to live with the scarring.
Oh, that's right.
That was an uplifting film. I'm just kidding.
So to do a romantic comedy, kind of a storybook comedy, is a big change for you, huh?
Well, so around, I don't know, maybe like 9 years ago or something like that, I had done all these dark, tragic films, and I was talking to my brother, and he said, what are some of your log lines, And I told him, and of course it's, it's like, it's all really, really, really dark. There was another one where a man cuts himself open to find something inside of him, only to realize that there was nothing there, and he dies. I mean, it was just like they were all dark, tragic stories with like warning, cautionary tales. There were cautionary tales, and so, but I told him all these dark stories, and he goes, "So you do comedy, huh?" Ha. And I was like, and he was joking, but when he said that, I thought, oh my God, could I do these dark comedies? Could I make these crazy stories and all this like edgy stuff that I like to do? And could I make it comedic? Because certainly more people would want to watch it than I think. I mean, I'm not quite as dark as I used to be, but I have really enjoyed embracing the absurdity of everything and having people laugh. Because the other thing about comedy is you can measure it. Like if you do a dark movie, like any of those three that I just mentioned, and you take, like I screened Inside, the one about the man cutting himself open. I screened that in Milan, and I'm trying to tell, or Fantastic Fest in Austin, I screened at Fantastic Fest, and you're trying to like tell what people are thinking, but you can't really, and there's no way to really measure it, But with comedy, if they're laughing, it's working, So
interesting.
I needed something to understand if what I was doing was working. And so I really liked switching to comedy.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that. But having sat through a lot of film festivals, you're absolutely right. You get that immediate feedback from your audience if you get that laughter. And when you're doing test screenings, right? You learn what's working, what's not working before you get to your final edit. That's interesting.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of test screenings. I mean, a lot of people don't like them, but I like filmmaking as a communication. And how do you know if you're communicating, if you're not, I don't mean that I want to like make every change based on what any single group says, but there's always like, why are they not getting something? What's not coming through? How can you fix it?
Well, kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about. I mean, this has been some very strange times. We have the obvious world pandemic that has greatly affected us since really March is when it really hit us. I mean, is that when you really felt it? I went to, this is embarrassing maybe a little bit, but I went to a Lakers game on March 10th, and I didn't touch anybody. I didn't cough on anyone or anything like that, but I thought I still was in maybe a little bit of a denial.
Yeah, I just didn't think it would be quite, in pretty much the 11th, March 11th is when I was like, oh, wow, Okay, and I stayed home from March 11th pretty much for a while, for like a month.
Right.
But yeah, that's March 11th was the beginning of it for me.
Well, it was funny. You mentioned March 10th, was it? I had to go back and look at the calendar. But for me, the point when it really hit home was when they canceled South by Southwest, because they did it exactly 1 week before the festival was supposed to start. And I was like, holy cow. This is serious. So that week,
serious.
That week it's like when everyone's like, okay, this is getting serious, but we still weren't like hardcore about, social distancing and all that. It wasn't, I remember like that Sunday, Monday, I want to say like March 15th was when it really just shut down. And it's like, okay, you should not be going out. That's when they started releasing all the guidelines and all that. So yeah, and then of course, we're going through now where things started to reopen, and here in Texas, of course, we're seeing this huge resurgence. And I think there's still this sense of denial. I mean, some people are like, okay, we need to do what we need to do to help stop the spread, and we need to start, really self-quarantining ourselves. Other people are like, it is what it is, and they're just not, doesn't feel like people are as concerned. Texas is a whole different kind of animal when it comes to the mentality here, right?
Yeah, well, Texas and California's not doing so well either, really. But yeah, I mean, I think people are prioritizing, their own freedoms in a way that's understandable. But we got to protect each other. We're in this together, and just, until everybody understands that, we're not going to get out of it. So it's a little tricky.
It is. It really has been. And it sounds like it's going to continue to be tricky, and it's going to, obviously all the ridiculous politicizing of it, I think it's just unbelievable because this isn't a political issue. This is a humanity issue
It's a
and
human
safety
issue. Yeah, it's exactly.
you know?
It's a human issue.
And then,
Sorry. I just want to say one thing. Speaking of a human issue too, like it's like we're all in this together, and I am starting. It's like been 4 months now since I've had like much face-to-face interaction, and like I've had like 2 hugs in like 4 months, and I'm like, wow, we need each other. Like we really need each other, and so like figuring out how to navigate, we are social creatures. So like, how do we navigate this?
Right.
Like humans, like it's true. You want to protect everybody, but you also like, we need to see people. We need to and Zoom doesn't always work. So I'm still figuring that out. Honestly, do you have it figured out at all? I'm working on it.
I mean, we've had very small get-togethers with, few people, 3, 4 people, keeping social distant and all that.
Yeah.
And, just kind of being in someone's yard and being able to just talk in person, I think has helped at times. But even that we've started to really cut back on. So yeah, it's a little bit of a trying time. And on top of that, just to make things even more complicated, and I bring this up because I know you're such an amazing advocate, is what's going on with Black Lives Matter and what's going on with just this ridiculous, absurdity of, the use of force by the police. And I mean, obviously it's been going on forever. And now because of these, I mean, let's face it, the only reason this has become so big is because it's finally getting captured on video and it's undeniable.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a few things. I think, if I remember correctly, the LA riots, the Rodney King riots, they only lasted 6 days. We had video of that. And it was horrible, but they lasted 6 days because people had to go back to work, and George Floyd happened. Of course, I was already very much up in arms about Ahmaud Arbery from day one. I was, as were many, 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 many other people. And I knew about Breonna Taylor because that had happened actually before. And so, this has been an ongoing issue. But when George Floyd happened, people were in lockdown or they were laid off their jobs, or they weren't able to do. So I feel like we've had this time to sit and think about what's really important, and to kind of stew on what's not right with our country. And there's a lot that's not right with our country. So when the opportunity came to speak up and say something, I think a lot more people were available to do that for a lot longer than they would be if the pandemic weren't happening.
Interesting point.
Yeah.
And it's not just our country. The thing that's been amazing is to see how much we've seen protests and people speaking up all over the world.
Totally. I mean, like, all over the world. And the recent Rayshard Brooks, and I mean, it's not going to stop until we change things. And, some of the laws have to be changed, and it may look hopeless in the big picture, but it's not. And it's like, it takes all of us educating ourselves on the city and state levels as to who we're putting in office. And we all have to vote, and we all have to put people in office who care about these things, and that will start to, and of course we need all the big federal things, and we're working on the banning chokeholds and ending qualified immunity and there's so many things that we're working on, but it's a process.
Do you feel like there's some progress now? I mean, because it became such a strong movement, it is a strong movement, and so many people have become vocal. It feels like there is some change starting to happen. Does it feel satisfying that this change is starting to happen, or does it feel like it's just a little drop in a bucket at this point?
I'm not an expert on, I do my best, but I'm not an expert. But what I think is, I think people are asking for, not asking, we're trying to demand, this is way beyond asking. Demanding such big things because things tend to taper off. Like you're noticing, like in your social media, there are less posts when they were, or like it was everything, and now it's like a little less. It's like, this cannot taper off. Like we have to continue, and I think it is getting better, but the only way it will really get better is if we continue. You cannot let up. You have to put pressure on the people in power, and you have to continue to put pressure on businesses to hire, you have to support Black-owned businesses and put pressure on businesses to hire Black people as execs and show their numbers of who they're hiring, and, all sorts of things. Like, it's just important that we continue to do that because it won't change if we don't.
Right.
It will go right back.
I'll tell you, I just seen all your social media posts and how big of an advocate you become and how vocal you become. I'm kind of proud of you. It's just like you are putting it all out there, and you are such a vocal person in this cause.
Thank
and
you, Chucky.
I mean, you've been taking action too. I mean, did you go out to some of the protests?
I didn't. I don't have a spleen, and I know I might be okay if I got coronavirus, but I figured
Yeah.
if I got sick, I would be less help. And there were a lot of people out in LA,
Yeah.
so I thought, okay, I'm gonna call the lawmakers in Kentucky for Breonna Taylor, and I'm gonna call them in Georgia for
Right.
Ahmaud Arbery, and I'm gonna, I wrote letters and did things like that. And
You've been encouraging a lot of people to do those things too.
yeah,
So it's not just you.
it's not that hard. Before I had cared about, a lot of marginalized communities and brutality, and I've cared about a lot of these topics before and these issues. But I hadn't spoken out like this until this year, probably like when it was March, I guess, March was when I started speaking. But, and, I have to say, like, if you just start replacing I can't with I can, if you just say, because you say like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't have enough money to give to that charity. Well, just give what you can, or I don't have time
Right.
to call that lawmaker. Well, you don't have time to call 10 lawmakers. Well, you have time to call one, so whatever you
Yeah.
have to give, maybe you're like, oh, but I just make masks. I'm just making something up, but I just make masks. Well, then make masks for protesters, or, whatever you do in life, there's something you can do to help that cause. And there's somebody that needs it. So like my 18-year-old niece, she might be 19 now, but she's home from school, and she's making masks, and the proceeds are going to Trans Women of Color Collective, and she's 19 years old.
Wow.
So like
That's awesome.
she's doing what she can from home, and so it's like everybody can do something. And if everybody does something, we'll continue, and it won't taper out. And if it tapers out, that is after everything everybody's done to make this, seen and to be heard and to start changing. If it starts to taper out, then that's on us. Like that's on us as for me, as a white person, that's on me if it tapers out, because it's our turn and our we have to carry the torch here. We have to help. This is crazy,
No, these are great points, and I appreciate it a lot, because it's so important, like you said, to follow through and to continue to carry that torch.
Yeah.
And man, I mean, I can't say, even though I'm Hispanic and I felt some of the prejudice growing up, but I've been privileged from the sense of, coming from a family that had decent means. So I can't say I've ever been in the shoes of, what a black person growing up in a lower socioeconomic type of situation, and how difficult it is, and how disadvantaged they are, and how much fear they live in from the people who are supposed to protect our society,
Yeah.
And that's just it's wrong, and it's I hope and I pray and continue to have faith that this movement will continue and will only get stronger, and there will be real change.
Yeah. We just have to work together. I saw this cartoon, a comic strip kind of thing, or drawing illustration that was like, I think it was a black woman in one lane and a white man in the other lane. And the white man's lane was clear, and he could go straight to the finish line, and the black woman's lane had like an alligator over water and like barbed wire and all these crazy obstacles,
Wow.
and he looks in the illustration, he's looking at it, he says, what? It's the same distance, and
Wow.
I think about that a lot. And I think like, we're just helping remove some of the obstacles. That's all we're doing.
Yeah.
Like, we want things to be equal and fair, and we just need to remove some of these obstacles that are making it unfair for people.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on and helping tell some stories here. And I think even though it got a little serious there at the end, it's important. I think that's it's an important subject.
Yeah, it is very important.
Every now and then, it's also nice to take a break from so much seriousness going on, and that's kind of part of the fun of doing this, is to be able to tell some fun stories and remember some good times as well. So it all is a good balance, right?
I can't wait to take another trip with you, Chucky. When this is all
right? when we can all travel again. Yeah,
I know.
Absolutely. You, me, Sarita. I don't think you never met Jonna, have you?
No, but I hear she's the best. I can't wait to meet her.
She is so cool. She's awesome. And so, yeah, so we're all going to have a fun trip together when the coast is clear.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be looking forward to it. I'll save up my miles.
There you go. All right.
All right, Chucky. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Chucky. I'll see you soon.
Take care. All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Chucky Radio. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're listening to this podcast on any of the major podcast services like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, please hit that subscribe button so you're notified of future podcasts. Also, would love to get your feedback, so rate the podcast, make a comment. I'd really appreciate that. Until next time, peace out.